крупнейшими магнатами из США, занимающимися недвижимостью. Доля американского капитала в московском бизнесе пока что ничтожно мала. Владимир Ресин в общих чертах охарактеризовал положение столичного строительства и предложил несколько программ, в которые магнаты могли бы с выгодой для себя вложить деньги.
Leon Black is an American private equity investor. He is the former CEO of Apollo Global Management, which he co-founded in 1990. Leon Black was a business associate of Donald Trump. He and Trump traveled to Russia together in 1995 in an attempt to drum up some new business. At the time, Apollo Global Management was 6 years old and still developing into the juggernaut it was soon to become. Black is also friends with Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. Business interests aside, there is another ominous commonality between Donald Trump and Leon Black. They were both good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Black's connections and mysterious payments to Epstein eventually led to his massive fall from grace. After an internal investigation, Black was forced into an early retirement.
Tom, to me, away from Apollo and away from the markets, the headline should be Leon Black paid Jeffrey Epstein $158 million for services over 5 years as like a tax advisor. I mean, this is a story of a U.S. billionaire paying a convicted sex offender hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, with the lending, it brings him $200 million into Jeffrey Epstein. And the report found that he visited Epstein's home in New York multiple times and his other homes around the world as well.
But another big story coming out after the close last night out of the private equity space. Apollo Global Management announcing that Leon Black will step down as its CEO. This coming after an investigation into Black's dealings with Jeffrey Epstein.
You know, to be clear, Leon Black is a Wall Street titan and, you know, sort of by himself with his two partners, but he is the face of the firm, built Apollo into a private equity juggernaut, and he's worth, by some estimates, $8 to $10 billion personally, and just has a tremendous amount of clout when it comes to the restructuring business. But he's had this longstanding relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and it slowly came back to bite him. I mean, he was always constantly saying, I'm not that close to him, not that close to him. And this investigation by an outside law firm suggests that Black and Apollo paid him in excess of $158 million. Now, it's said that that's because Epstein did consulting work that helped Apollo save much more money in terms of taxes. But it stinks to high heaven. And, you know, it's like calling up Count Dracula and asking him to do work, you know, on your, you know, consulting with a part of your business. I mean, it just doesn't fly.
Are we getting closer to this idea that there was compromise and extortion by Jeffrey Epstein of some of the people in his black book?
Well, it's certainly seeming like the pieces of the puzzle are getting closer together, Leland. We're not all the way there yet, but look, this new lawsuit accusing Leon Black of a really horrific, brutal sexual assault.
This lawsuit, and I appreciate you saying really horrific acts, because what happened or alleged to have happened to this 12-year-old girl is sickening, and not describe what happened. But nevertheless, this is all separate from what has already happened in the payouts Leon Black has already made.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have three major components of the Leon Black Epstein thing. We have the $158 million that he gave apparently for tax advice. We have the U.S. Virgin Islands payment of $62 million. And look, the Virgin Islands were not even going after Leon Black. We got the subpoena today. It was filed back in 2021. They just asked him for photos of his trips to the Caribbean with Epstein and for documents about their communications. He was so desperate to not hand those over that he paid $62 million. Then the third component, arguably the worst, is this new lawsuit. And it's, by the way, the second lawsuit filed against Leon Black by a woman who claims she was raped by him in Jeffrey Epstein's house.
Leon Black has had several sexual assault and rape allegations launched against him. His latest one is by an Epstein victim, whose name is being withheld for protective purposes. The lawsuit describes in gruesome detail the woman's account of a sexual assault that left her bleeding and sobbing. Her lawyers say that the woman, identified as Jane Doe, has autism and a rare form of Down syndrome that has left her developmentally about 12 years old. Here are a few excerpts from the victim's sworn affidavit. It provides a small window into the horrific fantasy world that Jeffrey Epstein provided his clients.
After he entered the room, Mr. Black tossed me over his shoulder and threw me onto the massage table, knocking the wind out of me. I tried to scream, but he placed his hand over my mouth and leaned over me while ripping off my shirt and reached under my skirt and pulled my underwear off. He called me demeaning names during the assault and laughed at my attempts to escape. I then heard him rummaging among the adult toys nearby, and he roughly snapped my legs apart. It felt as if my pelvic bone had been broken. Using the adult toys, Mr. Black then penetrated me simultaneously in both my vagina and rectum, using such force that I felt tearing in my internal tissue. When I screamed out in agony, Mr. Black again covered my mouth with one of his hands. When Mr. Black was performing oral sex on me, I felt a sharp pain in my vagina, like a hard pinch. I let out a loud scream. When I screamed, Mr. Black lifted his head out from under my skirt, and I saw blood on his mouth. I panicked and kicked him with my right leg. My kick landed on his chest, and while it likely did not hurt him, he was enraged that I struck out at him and he began viciously cursing me. He then called me a whore and a slut, and picked me up off the massage table and threw me to the floor. Mr. Black got back on top of me. That's when I went into shock and began to disassociate, trying to convince myself that I was somewhere else other than the unimaginable pain I was experiencing. When it was finally over, I begged Jeffrey Epstein to take me to a doctor because I was in physical agony and was continuing to bleed. But he refused, instead telling me that Ghislaine Maxwell would take care of me. Jeffrey Epstein handed me some towels to clean myself up. He then took me down to the second floor of his townhouse and told me to wait in a chair. He grew increasingly frustrated as I continued to cry. He demanded that I pull myself together as he was expecting a visitor.